You know, when our teaching team settles on a series and determines the scriptures and the direction, we then pull together what we call a series summary paragraph. It's basically that, just a paragraph. It describes often what the tension or the why of this series is going to be. And then we also include often the resolution, or how are we going to speak to this issue. So for this series called Open Letters, here's the series summary paragraph. Wouldn't we all love to go back and make a few course corrections in our lives? Maybe sidestep those if I only knew then what I know now moments. Some mistakes and failures in life can be treasured life lessons. Others are just plain train wrecks. We have decided to spend November at Northway hearing from 3 seasoned pastors with combined 137 years of following Christ, 104 plus years of church ministry experience in their rearview mirror. In this 4-part series titled Open Letters, you will hear humble accounts of life lessons learned. Join us for an opportunity to get it right the first time. So in this series, you'll hear from me week 1 and week 2. Then I'm really excited about this. Our founding pastor, Jay Passavant, will be here week 3 to share with us. And then week 4, you're going to hear from our Sewickley Valley campus pastor, Scott McCabe, who, by the way, outside of Jay, is the longest tenured pastor at Northway. And let me just tell you something. This is not going to be a series, from our seasoned pastors telling you things like, I wish I would have exercised more, or I wish I have worn shoes with better arch support, right? I mean, that's not where we're headed in this series. This series is about faith. It's about our faith, about our understanding of the things of God. What would we have wished we would have known earlier when it comes to the area of faith? So we're going to write an open letter to you about faith. Of that 137 years of following Christ, 38 of them are mine. Of that 104 ministry years, 26 of them are mine. So clearly I'm the youngster of this trio. I met Christ late in my senior high school years, and I made a career change to ministry very late in my 20s. So if you're trying to figure it out, that makes me 54. And though most of the time I don't feel old, at my most recent doctor's visit, he verified that it is indeed arthritis that's the reason that's causing you some pain in your jogging and working out. I always thought arthritis was for old people. Apparently it takes one to know one, because I also discovered that age is creeping up on me when I attended a wedding reception recently of a staff person here. I seldom go to the wedding receptions of the weddings that I officiate. One is because no one wants to sit next to the pastor, right? Also the couple, they often sit me with that odd group of relatives that they can't figure out who else to sit with. You sit down at the table and it's like, hi, I'm the crazy Uncle Tommy from India. Want to see a magic trick? I'm like that really did happen. And the third reason why I don't go to receptions often is because I always get sat with the person from the family who's the absolute furthest from God, and they think somehow like dinner with me is gonna save him. But on this particular wedding, I decided we wanted to go to the reception. And they clear the dance floor after dinner, and dancing is about to take place. And I knew I was indeed getting old when I didn't recognize any of the first 3 songs that were played. Not a word. However, everyone younger sure did. They knew all the words and the dance moves that went with these, that were associated with these specific songs. I'm thinking to myself, whatever happened to Celebrate Good Times by Kool and the Gang, right? Isn't that how we started? Old Time Rock and Roll by Bob Seger, isn't that the classic wedding reception song that happens? Well, not here. But the third song into the dance, I needed to go to the restroom. And it turned out that the only way to the restroom was through the dance floor. It was very crowded with a lot of staff members from Northway just dancing away to songs that I've never heard of. And so I decided I'm going to make my way across the dance floor, and people saw me coming. Hey, Pastor Scott, you're going to join us on the dance floor. I was like, no, I'm just, I'm trying to work my way through. And, I got about halfway out there, and the song was going, and it was like, people were telling me, now watch me whip. Now watch me nay-nay. Now watch me whip. Now watch me nay-nay. And I'm like, no, no nay-nay, just pee-pee. I'm just trying to get across, just trying to get through here. It's a very awkward moment. Knew indeed that I was aging. So, though I'm the youngest of the seasoned crew, I feel qualified to speak from experience when I thought through what are the few things concerning faith that I wish I would have learned earlier. There were many, but I landed on a couple that I wanted to share with you in these two sermons. And these sermons have really been on my heart for over 6 months. Let me ask you a question here. Have you ever had the passion or the drive to do something, to be really good at something, and then you met someone that was better at it than you? You know, you felt like, man, I was born to do this. I am gifted to do this. And then you met with someone that's like equally felt they were born to do it, and you discovered that they were more gifted and better than you, maybe even a lot better than you at it. You know, it's not a problem when it's something you don't care about, right? Like, I don't really care much about math or accounting, so I'm totally fine with, when I meet somebody that's like a lot better than that at me. We have a finance committee here at Northway. They are incredibly gifted men and women when it comes to working with numbers and spreadsheets and finances and math. They meet once a month to watch over all of our books and our numbers. And, I go to that meeting every month. I know I should. But I'll admit, it's not my favorite meeting of the month. It's not. They pass out stacks of papers, no pictures. I mean, not a single picture. Barely even any words. Just columns of numbers in like size 6 font. I can't even make sense of it. Once a year, the auditors come, right? The auditors come with our year-end audit. And in this finance committee, they get absolutely giddy, like when the auditors come in. They put on their best outfit. They bring snacks. I mean, you think Justin Timberlake was rolling up into that meeting. But see, it's frustrating when it's something that you want to excel at. And you realize that there's a lot of people that are just simply better at it than you. When I was in Little League baseball, when I was like 10 or 11, I was really good. I threw a no-hitter one day. The kids all signed the ball. So if you want proof of this, it's on here. I signed the ball. I kept it. The very next week, I went out and pitched. I threw another no-hitter. And the very next week, I threw a third consecutive no-hitter. They stopped signing the balls and giving them to me. But by the time I was like 12 or 13 years old, I wasn't pitching anymore. I was barely cracking the starting lineup. And lots of things may have contributed to that, but one of the things that definitely contributed to that was that a lot of the other boys my age were experiencing growth spurts. See, and when I hit 9th grade, I was like 5'3", 105 pounds, and I could barely make the team in high school. And now I'm 6 foot tall. And see, my growth spurt didn't happen till really late in high school. Actually, even into my freshman year of college, when I grew nearly 8 inches in 2 years. I dug up this picture of me my freshman year in high school. That's what happens when your weight can't keep up with your height. I was as skinny could be. But see, I loved back then playing baseball. I had the drive. I tried real hard. But by 10th grade, I didn't have the capacity to make the team anymore. Let me ask you another question. Have you ever met someone that seemed to have a higher capacity of faith than you? You know what I mean? Like we've all got the same God, but did you ever meet someone who seemed to have a bigger God than yours? Like people that just trust and they believe, and they seem to have an incredible depth or capacity of belief and faith. So here's one thing that I would write in this open letter to you that I wish I would have learned a long time ago. It's this, that you may not have control over your height or your ability to hit a fastball. You may not have control over your health or the difficulties that this world hurls at you. You may not have control over the brokenness or the sinfulness of people in your life, but folks, you have control over your faith capacity. And how many of us are not living up to our faith capacity? What if your capacity is more than you imagined? What if you've underestimated what your life could be like because you have, become numb or satisfied with a less than capacity faith? I don't believe in the New Testament of the Bible that it's just a collection of random stories that Jesus interacting with his disciples. I believe that the eyewitnesses that recorded those stories placed them in there for us to learn something about our faith. And there's a very familiar verse. If you grew up around church, you're going to probably know this story. It's found in Mark 6. That's where I'll be most of the rest of the sermon. But I believe in this particular story, Jesus is trying to show his disciples how to live a faith that's beyond their capacity. And it's found and it starts in Mark 6, verse 30. It says, the apostles returned to Jesus and told him all that they had done and taught. And he said to them, come away by yourselves to a desolate place and rest a while. For many were coming and going, and they had no leisure even to eat. And they went away in the boat to a desolate place by themselves. Now many, though, they saw them going and recognized them, and they ran on foot from where all the towns to go ahead of them to this desolate place, to meet them there. See, the disciples, they're sent out by Jesus to teach this beautiful message of life and hope, and the masses are coming. Why? Well, because people are excited to hear about a God that claims to know them and to love them. And this work to the disciples, it's fascinating, but it's also exhausting. And Jesus tells them, let's take a break. Let's take a break to a desolate place. And as a professing introvert, at times I really like a desolate place by myself. However, this is something that you need to know. If you begin to live your life at faith capacity, a life full of hope and love and joy, you will become a rare commodity to this world. And people will try to find you any way that they can because they want the life that's inside of you. You get more of God in your life and people are going to want more of you. And that's what's happening in this scripture. And it goes on in verse 34. When he went ashore, Jesus, so with the disciples, he saw a great crowd and he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. That's one thing you got to know about Jesus, folks. He always has time for our needs. It goes on, he began to teach them many things, and when it grew late, his disciples came to him and said, this is a desolate place, and the hour is now late. Send them away to go into the surrounding countryside and villages and buy themselves something to eat. You see how concerned the disciples are about the people? They're like, hey, we care so much about these people, but could you please just send them away, right? So they can go get dinner. It's getting dark. We're tired, and if they don't get out of here now, we're going to be stuck with them all night long. Man, I love, this is a famous part of this text. I love what Jesus does. He just turns them in verse 37. He says, you give them something to eat. Don't you hate that? I hate when God does that to me sometimes. When I say to him like, God, don't you see this problem? God turns around and goes, I'm glad you noticed that problem. Been sort of waiting for you to notice that problem so that you and I can, go at it together. And the disciples, their response when Jesus says, you go feed them, I love it. They say to him, shall we go and buy 200 denarii worth of bread and give it to them to eat? And Jesus said, well, how many loaves do you have? Go and see. So I don't think this took very long, They looked around, we got 5. And we found a couple fish, too. Have you ever talked to God about the problems in your life or in the world as if he had no clue what was going on. You know what I mean? Like, God, don't you see what's happening here? See, the disciples, their first blast back to Jesus when he said, you feed them. They basically said, are you crazy? That would take like a half a year's wages to feed this many people. But see, folks, I'm convinced of it, that God puts us in these moments where we want him to do something, or we want him to do more in order for us to discover that God will never do more until we care more. Folks, if you want God to do more, then you need to care more about what he cares about. The disciples didn't really care about these people at this moment. Send them home. It's late. We're tired. We're hungry. And the disciples were basically saying, Jesus, you need to be Jesus for our needs right now. I know you're God and you're used to taking on big projects, but what they're really saying is we want you to take care of our needs right now. Send these people home. And I think we're all prone to this at times. You know, God, take care of me. God, be generous to me. God, cut me a break. Don't you see what's going on here? See, and I'm here to tell you today that perspective, that attitude will not increase your faith capacity. What do I know now that I wished I'd have known earlier? One of the things is this. The weight of humanity's pain is crushing and overwhelming. There are 7 billion people on this planet all trying to make sense out of life. And some estimate, folks, that nearly 6 billion are struggling with poverty. There are billions of people today, tonight, that will go home and not have enough food to eat. There are millions and millions of kids without parents or homes. Right here in our city, there are people struggling with despair, just trying to make it through the day. And what I used to think was, God, don't you see what's going on? Why don't you send them somewhere to get their needs met? And I think to myself, well, I can't do anything about it because, I'm just barely making it on my own. I also used to think years ago, I used to say to myself, like, God, I want you to trust me with more. God, you can trust me with more, God. But I discovered deep down that I don't know if I was really willing to trust him with more. I used to say to myself, like, God, God, why don't you be more generous to me? But deep down, I don't know if I was really willing to be more generous with him. Folks, if you are sitting here today and you think you're just barely making it, and if you're not willing to trust God with everything, if you're not willing to be generous with what he's giving you in order to bless others that he deeply cares about, then you will continue to just barely make it. And you won't realize the faith capacity that is available to you. Our world is filled with what I call faith capacity killers. And here's just a few. One of them is consumerism. And consumerism defined, it's just a belief that we can find fulfillment in accumulating wealth and the things that come with wealth. In our world today, I believe that consumerism is a brutal reality of trusting God and being generous. You ever hear the old saying, right? I've never seen a hearse pulling a trailer. But I think so often we live like we can take it with us. In Proverbs chapter 30, verse 8, it says this, give me neither poverty nor riches. Feed me with the food that is needful to me, lest I be full and deny you and say, who is the Lord? It's basically, God, I don't desire poverty, that scripture is saying, but I also know with wealth comes a powerful temptation to take the credit and deny you. I think the second faith capacity killer is individualism, right? This is having an excessively high opinion of oneself or one's importance. It's sitting on our own thrones. It's seeking to fulfill all of our wants and desires first or beyond others. See, folks, if you're seated on the power chair, then God cannot be. Galatians 2:20, it says this, I've been crucified with Christ. It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. And the life I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. Jesus, folks, he surrendered his seat on the throne. And he came on a rescue mission for us. And not so that we could sit in the power chair in his place. We're not saved to serve ourselves. We're not saved to place ourselves on the throne. We are saved to know God and to care for others. And the last or the third, and there's lots of faith capacity killers, but the third one I've got here, it's a lot more vague, but I wanted to include it. You could call it universalism or New Age thinking, but I've heard things along the lines like, yes, I believe in God, but I believe there's also lots of paths to God. I call it sometimes my ollie in free, come free belief, right? And folks, I got news for you. This isn't new. They call it New Age thinking. It's not new. This has been around forever. Romans chapter 1, verse 25 says, because they exchanged the truth about God for a lie and worshiped the creature rather than the creator, who is blessed forever. Either Jesus Christ is the Son of God, who was sent to live among us, die on a cross, and be raised again for us, or he was not. And you're not going to really care about what he cares about, and your faith capacity is not going to reach its potential if you think Jesus Christ is merely an option. These are faith capacity killers, and the enemy wants you to buy into every single one of them. And I believe when we go about pursuing these things, it leads to our children not knowing God because we don't have time. Or we've lost the focus of our role as godly parents because it's not getting them to hockey practice. It's raising kids to know the Lord. I believe when we pursue these faith capacity killers, right, it results in broken marriages and stress and depression and self-worth issues and in financial pressures. It's so prevalent in this country. It is why, like, if you've ever been on a mission trip into a third world country, to an orphanage, and you meet kids, and I've been there, and I've talked to folks, maybe you have, that have come home from a trip. What do they always say? They say they had nothing compared to us, but their faith and their joy was unbelievable. Why? Because consumerism isn't even on the table. Individualism isn't even a concept to them. And they've had an encounter with the one real God. Jesus is not an option to them. Jesus has sustained them. Man, their faith is at capacity. It's unbelievable. You know, we didn't finish the story in Mark 6, so let's go back there and pick it up in verse 39. Then he commanded them all to sit down, all these people, 5,000 plus people, plus women and children, probably 10,000 people there. He has them all sit down in groups in the green grass. So they sat down in groups of hundreds and by 50s. And taking the 5 loaves of bread, this is Jesus, and the 2 fish, he looked up to heaven and he said a blessing, and he broke the loaves and gave them to the disciples to set before the people. And he divided the 2 fish among them all, and they all ate and were satisfied. And they took up 12 leftover baskets full of broken pieces and of fish. And those who ate the loaves were 5,000 men. You know who fed the 5,000? See, this story is often called in the Bible, Jesus, feeds the multitudes, or Jesus feeds the 5,000. Those disciples, they brought Jesus the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, and it says that he blessed them, and then he gave them back to the disciples to go and feed the people. Jesus didn't feed the multitudes. The disciples fed them after they had an encounter with an incredible, caring, generous Son of God. In this moment, when Jesus said, you feed them, and the disciples started, I don't know, we can't do that, it's too much money, and we only got 5 fish and all that. You know what Jesus could have done? Move. Get out of the way. I'll show you how it's done. Let me show you how you're supposed to do this, right? Anybody ever remember Jimmy Fallon's character in Saturday Night Live, Nick Burns, the computer guy? Anybody know this guy? He would get called in when there was something going wrong with your office computer. Remember this skit, right? And the people would begin to explain to him, well, I can't get my printer to work, and I try to line up my, RH drive with my D drive, and what did Nick Burns always say? Move. Move. He was so rude, he would just scoot the people out of the way, and he'd sit down and fix their computer all arrogantly. Imagine the disciples saying, it's late, and we're hungry, and we're all tired, and we only have 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread. And Jesus said, move. That's not what he did. What did Jesus do? He pulled them close. And he included them in the process. He begins to teach them, if you trust me with what you have, I will expand your faith capacity 100-fold. See, folks, God is always willing to slow down his redemptive process for the world so that we can be part of it with him. But it takes our trust and generosity. And that's what I wish I learned a long time ago. If you want to do more, you have to care more. If you want God to trust you with more, then you have to trust God more. If you want God to be more generous with you, then you have to be more generous and give him everything. I want God to know that he can trust me more. And therefore, I needed to learn to love more, to forgive more, and to be more generous. It's the great exchange. It's the kingdom economy. Here's where I'm going to get a little personal, okay? Might even cause a little discomfort here today. But this is what I wish I would have learned a long time ago. That it starts with the giving of your money. We often say I want to give God my time, and I'm going to serve, and I'm going to use my gifts for God. And then someday down the line, when I'm in a better spot, because I'm just barely making it. Someday when I'm in a better spot, then I'm going to begin to give money, tithe, and maybe even hit that 10% thing. See, and I found, and I believe in America, it has to start with money. Because we are so surrounded and squeezed by consumerism and individualism. It's ruthless and it's relentless. And true freedom and maximum faith capacity is released when we give back to God what is God's. If you're wondering why maybe right now your life doesn't seem like you're living at faith capacity, I want to ask you a question. Are you giving? And this is what I'm going to talk about next week. And I want to ask you to have the courage to come back and hear my heart on the subject of tithing. And I bet you that maybe there's some folks here today and you're saying, see, there it is. All they do, talk about money. Well, then you haven't been around Northway over these past 4 years since I've been the lead pastor. Because I haven't and we haven't. Understanding generosity is the one thing. When we put this study together, it's the one thing that I know now that I wished I would have known a long time ago. And I would be doing a disservice to you without sharing it with you. See if this statement resonates with you. It's a couple sentences from Christian author Philip Yancey. And he says this: I feel pulled in opposite directions over the money issue. Sometimes I want to sell everything I own and give it away, and other times I want to rid myself of guilt and enjoy everything that is available to me in this great nation. Mostly, though, I wished I did not have to think about money at all. However, I knew I must somehow come to terms with the Bible's very strong statements about money. The journey was not easy, but it was worth it. Here's the key for what I've learned along the way on this issue. It's difficult. It's confrontational. It's challenging. It's convicting. But it is also comforting and freeing. And it has expanded my faith capacity more than anything else that I have discovered along the way. That is my open letter to you. Are you willing to hear the word of God on this topic, even if it convicts us? Well, I guess we'll find out next weekend. Because if attendance is down next week, then I'll guess that you weren't mature enough to come and hear God's word about this. If attendance is up or steady, then I'll guess you're a very mature group. I'm pretty sure I just dared you to be here next week. I really do want to encourage you to come back next week. We're going to start back in the Old Testament, and we're going to look at God's perspective on our possessions and our giving all the way up to Jesus. I'm excited to deliver this message. I believe if you grasp this concept, it'll be absolutely freeing to you. I'm going to ask our campus leaders at our other campuses to step up and close their service.